I I hope this is working. Not sure, but can you hear me? Yeah, all right. Good afternoon and a warm welcome to this policy briefing organized by the European Policy Center with the Minister of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade of North Macedonia, Timcho Mucunski. Minister Mucunski, thank you so much for taking the time to stop by the EPC on your visit to town and to address our Brussels-based audience at this very complex moment in time when geopolitical and geoeconomic shifts of tectonic proportions are challenging our understanding of normality and are in a sense threatening to upend our reality. Against the current volatile and dangerous backdrop, or perhaps because of it, we have seen a renewed interest on the part of the EU for enlargement. Developments on the dossier, developments which until recently would have seemed impossible, or developments which previously have taken decades to come about, have been unfolding with remarkable speed over the past few years after the start of the war in Ukraine. How has North Macedonia capitalized on this new momentum on enlargement, and how hopeful are you that the enlargement imperative will continue to pay dividends also henceforth, including for your country? We are very keen on hearing your reading of the present situation and in its implications for your country's European integration prospects. I will pass on the floor to you, and following your speech, I will give the opportunity to our participants to join our conversation with questions and comments that they might have. If that's agreeable to you, then Minister, over to you.
Hour?
Yeah,
that's okay. Perfect. Thank you very much for the opportunity to be here, for your organization to host me, to speak to this audience from what I know from various different parts of the Brussels bubble and the Brussels community who are engaged on European integration and European enlargement. I will try not to speak too long, although a previous group I met with, I told them we politicians are used to just speaking and many times not listening. I'll try to behave in exactly the opposite way, to give what I would call food for thought, input, and then hopefully get questions from you where we can directly engage on issues that interest you, whether it's the case of North Macedonia, or whether it is something even further beyond, from regional issues to global issues and so forth. When I go first in how you started your question and the case of our nation's path towards EU membership, what I will do is I will try to be careful in my optimism, because I don't want to be seen as naive in front of you. I will also be careful in my criticism to the EU, because I know there's representatives of EU institutions here, and I don't want to bring visa liberalization at any risk. So I'll try to be careful in my criticism as well. But what I will say first to start off the discussion is that there is a gap that exists when it comes to delivery on the part of the European Union. And on the other side of that delivery, you have expectations that have been established by the European Union itself. And one of the examples I say, the prime example, is my country. This year is what I have labeled in the past few months as the year of a very sobering anniversary. 20 years since we gained candidate status. The year that we gained candidate status, Montenegro was not an independent country. In the meantime, we have still not opened accession negotiations. Croatia, which started the path together with us, going back even before the candidate status to the so-called stabilization and association process, is now part of Schengen and uses the euro as a national currency. Let me again point out, we have not yet opened accession negotiations. There are some in Brussels circles, and I say this, they joke with me, they say, you're such a good candidate, we want to keep you there. Hopefully that doesn't end up being true. Why I come to this point? A victim, yes. I don't know if I will use the term success in that same context, but I can understand why some would interpret it as that. The issue that we have is the following. And you mentioned the momentum, the term momentum. It's not a term I take lightly. Why it's not a term I take lightly? It's because we have heard this term for so many times, even on a repetitive basis. I give an example. In 2018, when the Prespa agreement or the implementation of the Prespa agreement was in full force, I was then working as an advisor to the leader of the opposition, now Prime Minister. And I remember almost every leader in Europe visited, even further than Europe, whether it was Theresa May or Angela Merkel, or I remember James Mad Dog Mattis, the then US Defense Secretary, visited. And this is one of the terms they used back then as well. This is your window of opportunity. Use the momentum. You get NATO membership immediately, EU membership 4 to 5 years down the road, if you do the job. Those 4 or 5 years ago, we like to point out, passed about a year and a half ago. So when it comes to enlargement, as I said, I don't want to be purely critical. I say there is something excellent, very smart, that happened a while ago. That is the so-called EU growth plan and the reform agenda that is integral to that growth plan, which is a stimulating model based on incentives that stimulates the countries from the region to move forward on the EU path, to get reforms done, to achieve tangible results. One of the priorities we've set for ourselves as a government is being the best in the region when it comes to the reform agenda and when it comes to using the funds from the growth plan. We don't see this as an alternative to accession negotiations, but we also see it as a method by which we prove our political commitment to stakeholders, not just in Brussels, but to stakeholders among the member states, that we as a government are committed to this path, no matter how difficult it will be. And the reforms that are part of the reform agenda in various different fields are, many of them, extremely difficult and will be difficult to achieve and will require transformative change within society. And this is something that we are committed to. We became the first government in the region to receive a tranche through the growth plan. It was about a week ago. We are also very proud of being the first country in the region that signed a security and defense partnership with the EU. It was actually one of the last big events of Mr. Borrell's tenure as High Representative. I signed this agreement with him, and we see this as a very useful tool, especially considering what you mentioned. Current geopolitical developments, the role of security and defense in how the EU integration process moves forward. When it comes to the underlying issue, and I want to speak very openly about this, I am very much aware that one of the key underlying issues is the issue with Bulgaria. This is an issue that we as a government are engaged on. This is an issue where we as a government will engage with Brussels, will engage with the member states, and will engage directly with Sofia to find a rational solution. What is a rational solution? A rational solution is one where if we do what is expected of us, the constitutional changes, we have an institutionalized model that guarantees that we won't get back to this 6 to 12 months down the road. That, again, our negotiation process will not be burdened by issues of identity, of history, of language, of nationalism, of ethnicity, but that we will finally be allowed to move forward on the path, on the basis of merit, on the basis of a key. And I understand the argument sometimes given from other sides in terms of this is a bit difficult to guarantee. But if anyone deserves a model where we know our path clearly in moving forward, it is our country. I very often remind whoever I speak to, a country that for the promise of an EU future has changed its flag, has changed its currency, has changed its constitution several times, has even changed its name for the European promise. So if anybody deserves flexibility in that sense, it is our country. What I can say is that we as a government will be very committed to the reforms spurred by Brussels that are integral to the EU accession process. No problem. It's a big city, this happens. What I can tell you is that our society yearns for change. I presume many of you are aware of what happened about 2 weeks ago in the city of Kochani, a very tragic night fire, which I think shook the whole nation from an emotional standpoint. 59 young people died, most of them, a huge majority between the ages of 15 and 25. Hundreds were injured. And I say this issue, apart from the emotional toll it has taken on our nation, has also taught us some lessons. First of all, the lesson of solidarity, the lesson of European solidarity. The reaction which we saw by our neighbors, but also by most of the European continent, was something that touched us deeply. Many lives were saved thanks to quick reactions, and not to name all the nations, but within the first hours by nations such as Greece, Bulgaria, Serbia. We now have patients that are coming back all the way from Lithuania, which were hospitalized in Lithuanian hospitals, Sweden, Austria, Spain, not to name them all. So we learned the lesson of solidarity, but even more importantly, our government in the last 10 months has been committed in the fight against corruption, organized crime, and establishing a system of rule of law. But this case was also a very difficult wake-up call that even more needs to be done, even more quickly. What has happened in the last 2 weeks is a case where around over 20 people have been arrested, including high-level officials from the previous government, but also including the then mayor of the city of Kochani from my own political party. And I think this is the key message that we need to send. Justice cannot be selective, and justice should always prevail. But on the other side, establishing a credible fight against corruption, establishing a system of rule of law is not just the role of government. It is a whole of society approach, which means that apart from government, you need the prosecutorial and judicial system on board. You need civil society on board. You need academia on board. It needs to be a system where everybody contributes to the process of not just creating reforms, but implementing reforms. It is not just about drafting and accepting good laws. It is also about a change in culture, in our social culture, in our political culture, in our mental culture, in terms of how we approach institutions and how we behave towards institutions. As I said, what I can commit to you is that our government will be steadfast, will be extremely committed to the reforms that we have promised. It will not be a battle that can be won overnight. It will take time, but we cannot allow it to take an indefinite amount of time. And this is where I think there have been commitments in the last few months, but that there will be continued commitment too. I will stop here because I presume that there's a lot of hopefully, or I would say I can't presume, but I hope there's interest from the audience. And I hope that there's very direct questions on issues that are of interest to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister, for this important input, food for thought, as you said at the beginning. I do want to encourage our participants to indicate if they want to come in, and while they muster the courage to raise their hand, I will maybe follow up with a few questions first. I mean, it's very interesting what you mentioned, this institutional model that you propose as a potential way forward in breaking this stalemate with Bulgaria. And I was wondering if you can give us a little bit more details about what you have in mind, because as you know, the EU doesn't necessarily have the competence as such to put pressure on directly on Bulgaria to set up such institutional instruments or models. So I'm wondering whether there's something concrete or specific that you have in mind when you mention this. So maybe we can start from there. Fill in this gap.
I am neither a bureaucrat nor a technocrat. I am a politician. And what I have found is that in politics, there is a very important principle, and that is where there is a will, there is a way. We saw how a few years ago, the EU implemented the empty chair rule, consensus -1. We see the principles that the EU is now speaking about when it comes to the issue of Ukraine. Consensus -1 on some issues. So I think, again, if there's a willingness, if there is a commitment, a path forward can be found. On the other hand, we are asking for something that is fundamentally logical, and that is that you don't have a country that is, again, vetoed 6 to 12 months down the road, again, because of a bilateral issue. And we say, as much as this will hurt us, our legitimacy, it will hurt the legitimacy of the enlargement process even more. So I think that there are ways. Allow me to not divulge directly into what I think, because I don't want to compromise discussions that are permanently ongoing in the background. But I think that there are paths we could pursue that we would all be comfortable with, and that would provide a credible European future, not just for us, but I believe for the entire region.
Fair enough. Then you mentioned the growth plan, and maybe a quick follow-up on that as well, because your country is one of the first ones to receive the pre-financing. And I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit more about what is in the reform agenda, and what you actually plan to spend that money on for in the foreseeable future.
So the reform agenda is multifaceted, is that it goes into many areas of deliverables, ranging from rule of law to environmental policy to energy independence and diversification. Most of the funds that we will be using will go into key CapEx projects, including on certain projects that are very important to the energy security, not just of our country, to our region as well, including, I would mention, the interconnector that we plan on working with. We are currently working on an interconnector with Greece that would link us directly to the LNG coming from the port of Alexandroupolis. And our aim is also to build, for example, another interconnector that would connect us with Serbia, which would have the liquid gas from Alexandroupolis flowing all the way up to Central and Eastern Europe. And we see this as a project that is of our interest, but of our common European interest as well when it comes to the issue of energy security. Just one example of how we would be using some of the funds coming from the EU's growth plan.
As you yourself said, some of the reforms and the plans will be transformative and are massive. Is the money enough to cover for the kind of investments that such efforts require?
It is definitely not enough. There is no doubt about this. And we have a very deep understanding that there will be a necessity for further investment coming in from the government for many of these projects, if not for most of them. But what I can say is that irregardless of whether or not the people living in our nation believe in the EU's capacity to deliver on enlargement, the whole of society is in huge proportions pro-EU. So this is an obligation we have towards our citizens. This is where they see their future. These are the best standards in the world in various different areas. So we will be delivering no matter how difficult it is and no matter how costly the process may be.
And you also mentioned the importance of bringing civil society on board with the European integration effort. And I'm wondering, specifically when it comes to the growth plan and the reform agenda, we know that the deadlines have been very, very tight, and that the progress that has been achieved has not always been able to allow for a process that is inclusive sufficiently of civil society. But we are where we are, and from now on, do you see the possibility to open up a process in which civil society or the wider public can follow the implementation of the reforms that have been agreed in these plans?
It's not just about following the reforms, it's about creating the reforms together. Mm-hmm. And it's about whether it's legislative changes or various different types of policies that need to be implemented, bringing civil society on board in the various different areas of interest that they may have. And I think that there is a very deep institutional understanding for this. I know in all of the work that we're doing, for example, in the foreign ministry, not only related to the growth plan, mm-hmm. but various different interests we have that are related to the European agenda and commitments we've undertaken, we make it a whole of society approach. Because
how do you do it?
In everything that we do, civil society is always on board, academia is on board where necessary, chambers of commerce are on board, because we also within the foreign ministry also have this portfolio of foreign trade. We always include various different stakeholders in the creation and the implementation of the policies that are necessary for the European future.
Thank you for that. At this point, I want to invite our participants to ask the minister questions, or if you have any comments. There is one hand over here, the second row, Tabea. Please introduce yourself and try to keep the question or comment short.
Can you hear me? Yeah. Hi, thank you very much. I am Alexandra Schoen and I work for Suez, a water and waste treatment company. So drinkable water, wastewater, recycling, waste from energy, etc. And I was curious, and you mentioned very slightly the topic on the acquis of everything going from environmental, laws, decarbonization, quality of water, and all these different topics. And at the same time, I just get the sense from what you're mentioning that you're focusing more on rule of law reforms before maybe the rest of it. How far are you looking at implementing the acquis in your new infrastructures in the next investments, and what is your view on this huge acquis on environmental topics that comes from the EU, and how Macedonia would take it on? Thank you.
I wonder if there's any other question. Yeah, we have. All right, that's more. Okay. Tabea, maybe we can start from here, just because it's closest, and then we'll come to you as well, sir. Yeah, good. Apparently, they cannot hear in the back, so maybe you can switch on the mic. Okay.
Welcome to us, Brussels. I would love to hear your opinion towards the Adriatic Union macro-regional strategy, where North Macedonia will be a big player and it's part of the strategy. How do you imagine the enlargement pillar will be new one? And it's already 10 years since it was created, this action plan. So we need more youth, and I suppose that more science for evidence for real policies in the European Union.
Were two other questions at the back, and then you can cherry pick. Yeah.
Hello, can you hear me? Oh, yes, it works. Okay. Hi, my name is William. I'm from the Danish Perm Rep. I work with enlargement, so in the Coila group. Maybe a comment and a question. The comment being, I think it's totally understandable that you and your country are frustrated with the lack of progress. If we have a merit-based approach and you feel you are rightly, let's say, not progressing because of the progress you made, I think that's not ideal. And I guess the dynamic speaking for myself, not on behalf of the EU, I think the dynamic we would like to have with encouragement through the merit-based process, I guess that is not made any easier if you have ahead of an EU institution saying there will not be an enlargement in the next 5 years. So I think a lot of understanding of your frustration. But as our moderator said, we are where we are. And I think what we're working on in enlargement now in the EU is the momentum. I realize if you don't like hearing the word, but what you didn't mention, and maybe allow me to compliment, is the war in Ukraine. And more importantly, the concrete progress we make with Montenegro, with Albania, and with other countries. We have reports now on Ukraine and Moldova. So despite, let's say, the frustration, I think there is objective momentum for some countries. That's just a comment. Maybe the question, there is, let's say, and maybe to add for the first comment, for Montenegro and Albania, there are bilateral issues that have been solved because we think now have a credible process. I realize it's not the same magnitude as the one you're dealing with, but just to say other bilateral issues have been removed and have been the basis for progressing. So again, that's for the comment. The question, one of the things we're looking at is alignment of CFSP, as you know, and North Macedonia is at 100%. There was a recent vote in the UNGA on Ukraine, where there was no EU 27 line, there was 26 line. And I think you voted with a country that was not part of this group. Can you maybe give us a bit of comments to this question? Thanks.
I know there was another hand up, but let's take those questions and then we'll come back for a second round.
I understand you, and I believe you that now is the momentum. But also understand us when, as I previously said, every leader in the European Union visited us about 5-6 years ago and told us this is our momentum and this is your moment. And now is the time to make tough decisions and move forward on the European path. So I believe you. But understand us when sometimes we hesitate, because many times this has been promised to us. And as I said, the gap between commitment and delivery seems to be getting bigger. I believe in what you say, that bilateral issues were solved within the process, and trust us when we say that we want to solve this bilateral issue as well. But we want to solve it in a manner by which it is sustainable, so that very quickly after solving it, we don't get back to the bilateral issue. And this is the fundamental fear that we have. And this is why we're trying to engage, and this is why we want to permanently engage. Because I don't want my entire mandate as foreign minister to be about the issue with Bulgaria. I want to talk about much more productive issues at hand that we could have in our foreign policy and implementing domestic reforms and promoting our nation. But for Tango, you need 2. Actually, in this situation, you need 27. And that is why I say, considering that your country is undertaking the presidency very quickly, this will be a role that will fall in your hands, as well, to help us be proactive in finding a solution to an issue that has been there for far too long in various different ways and forms. I think the essence of your question was related to this, correct? Yes, on Ukraine. We have been one of the biggest supporters for Ukraine in the past years. From NATO member states, GDP per capita, I think we're top 5 when it comes to security and defense support that we've given to Ukraine. When it came to the UN vote, I give the following view. Our nation has 3 constant variables in its foreign policy, and that is, as you rightly concluded, 100% alignment with the CFSP, NATO membership, and our strategic partnership with the United States. a formal strategic partnership on paper. In this situation, this was not an issue of the CFSP. The EU member states were not aligned. So in reality, we voted in alignment with the United States, as you can see in the pattern of our voting. And in no way and form did we harm our position when it comes to our alignment with the EU's common foreign and security policy. When it comes to regional initiatives, I think that they are greatly important. I always say for us, the issue of enlargement is not just a domestic agenda, it is a regional agenda. We need the entirety of the Western Balkan Six integrated into the European Union. And I think we need to use every viable format available to us, every regional initiative available to us when it comes not only to networking, but to creating common policies, to working together on trade. One of the greatest inputs we had by the Berlin process last year was the unblocking of CEFTA, for example, which was proving itself effective in the midterm and the long term. And these are the issues that we need to be talking about as a region. Coming back from a regional perspective to the issue of Bulgaria, the argument that I always personally give is the most to gain from EU membership is, of course, the nation that will potentially become a member. So from EU enlargement, we have the most to gain. But second highest on that scale, with the most to gain from our nation becoming a full EU member, are the nations that are our neighbors that are EU members. And that is primarily Bulgaria and Greece. From an economic, political, social perspective, education, name it, all of these fields. So I think we need to work on regional persuasion, that there are issues that have to be solved. Other issues will come up in the meantime. That is a normal dynamic between neighbors. Neighbors within Europe have disagreements, but they find rational ways to solve them. Causing disagreements that are of a generational proportion, as they are ongoing right now, are rifts that are extremely difficult to mend. In the situation with Kočeni and the tragic fire, as I mentioned, we proved that solidarity can work. We proved that we can work together. Now we need to relay that cooperation into areas that are practical and that bring positive input. In the area of environment, this is a very important issue. You mentioned some of the projects related to clean water initiatives. A big issue, especially in our capital city, is the issue of air pollution. And I think a lot of the commitments that are part actually of the reform agenda itself are related, as you said, to environmental policy, decarbonization, green energy. So these initiatives are there. They are less politically attractive, especially in these type of fora to talk about. So I thank you for bringing them to the light. But it doesn't mean that they're less important. They're equally, if not sometimes even more important issues that all governments need to focus on.
I can now come back to take the remaining hands. It was right in the middle. If you can indicate to my colleague that you've raised your hand. Yeah.
Thank you very much. So the speaker's on. Thank you, Mr. Foreign Minister Mucunski, for coming to the European Policy Center and for giving us some food for thought as you cleared out. I'm Can Arıçoğlu. I'm from the Turkish Industry and Business Association's permanent representation to the EU. My question to you, as North Macedonia, as you rightly mentioned, moves towards a institutionally driven EU path, what will happen to non-EU trade partners, security partners, and strategic partners of North Macedonia, like the United States, UK, and Turkey, whom have troops in Bosnia, Kosovo, and various other Balkan countries, and have a vested stake in the future security and economic future profile of the region? Let's put it that way.
And there was another question just.
Thanks very much. I'm Dan Hadari from the UK mission to the EU. First of all, I'd just like to offer my condolences for the tragedy in Kočani. We were wondering whether North Macedonia has managed to negotiate with Bulgaria now the government in Sofia is in place. Recent polling in North Macedonia suggests a third of citizens think the country won't join the EU. And we were wondering from your perspective on how this will be managed and how the different voter blocks within the country will look moving forward on this issue? Thank you very much.
Was there? Yes. Okay. Have a.
Thank you, Minister Marko Horvat, External Action Service. Warm welcome to Brussels. I would just like to use this opportunity to express our appreciation for full alignment of North Macedonia with the EU CFSP and also for your contribution to common security and defense policy. We cooperate with you very well also in multilateral fora. I think the cooperation during Macedonian chairmanship of OSCE was an excellent example, and we hope to continue this cooperation in the future, also in United Nations. And just to express hope that your cooperation with strategic partners will not endanger or will be in line with your strategic goal of joining the EU. Thank you.
I know that Berta has also wanted, but maybe if you'll accept a third round of questions, then so I'll.
So this is an issue when it comes to the first question on Turkey, but even going further than Turkey. I think the broader issue will become, especially in the upcoming period, as the situation in Ukraine develops, and hopefully we get closer and closer to peace. The situation will develop in a phase where the question that will be posed is, how will we bear responsibility for security on a European level? And what is the role of North Macedonia in this situation? And I constantly highlight this. One of the reasons why we as a government have said that have not been able to commit to troops on the ground in Ukraine, whatever the scenario in Ukraine is, because there are huge dilemmas there in terms of what the format of a peacekeeping force would be. Would it be Altea type, UN-led with NATO operational command? Would it be UN-led? I mean, these are all issues that are out there. But we have said we're not willing to commit to troops on the ground in Ukraine because we need to be a security provider in the Western Balkans. And here I especially mean the role of KFOR in Kosovo, which is extremely important, the role of Althea in Bosnia and Herzegovina, which is extremely important, and also the communication we have with our allies in NATO. The many dilemmas that do exist, including the issue opened by President Macron about France providing nuclear deterrence for Europe. And the question that we asked, and that I don't have an answer to, but I speak very openly about this, President Macron mean nuclear deterrence for the EU, or does he mean for all of Europe? If he means just the EU, then where are we and Turkey in this situation? So these are issues that we have to openly engage about. That's why I say I feel very happy that we have the security and defense partnership with the European Union. I am, unlike many others around us, not in this room, I speak from a general perspective. I am cautiously optimistic about the transatlantic partnership. I think it will find its ways to stabilize. I think that there is no path by which in the midterm and the long term Europe and the United States can diverge. I think they have more common interests that unite them than differences that will divide the European Union and the United States. And I think that once we get to a comfortable position of a just solution in Ukraine, which seems inevitable at this moment, or we hope is inevitable for the sake of the Ukrainian people, but also for the sake of our interests as European nations, that the bilateral, the dynamic of the transatlantic relationship will be more stable than many expect it to be. On the question coming from the representative of the United Kingdom, this is more from what I understood your question, a question on the internal political dynamic within our country and recent polling. And I think I even mentioned this in my intervention at the beginning. Our society is in huge majorities pro-EU, in a huge majority pro-EU. If you ask the question, how much of society wants to join the EU, the majority will be very large. If you ask the following question, do you believe that the EU will deliver? A lot of these people in the group that want the country to join the EU will now join the group where they say we don't trust the EU. And it is an issue of credibility, and it is an issue of credibility that we need to work on together with the EU. So it is not exclusively the burden of the European Union to solve the credibility crisis that I believe it has, not just in our country, but in the entire region. It's our role as well as national governments to say the EU path is credible. The EU path brings tangible delivery. The EU path is a necessity for the future of our nations and the future of our societies as a whole. And that this is not an easy task to solve. Not all of the member states are always helpful. We know this better than everybody else. But as I said, we need to be optimistic, and we need to provide concrete input on the way forward.
Do you mean? It is on. Do you mean to say that you are not particularly concerned about Trump 2.0? I mean, apart from potential disagreements with regards to Ukraine and how to handle the war in Ukraine. I mean, we know that we're expecting, some say, double-digit tariffs against all exports from Europe, and we know that publicly people from his administration have spoken about the divergences also with regards to what we understand by democracy. So you're not concerned that this could lead at some point to us choosing different camps or finding ourselves in different camps?
I think that there are many who are trying to push various views against the US administration who have a lack of understanding of some fundamental aspects of democracy. First of all, democracy is democracy. This is a president with a mandate, not only in his presidential mandate, but with majorities in both the House of Representatives and the Senate. So the American people decided to give him a very strong mandate to govern. We do not pick and choose our friends on the basis of day-to-day policies, but we need to look more towards the long term. And I think the fundament of the criticism given towards the United States has been in many ways unfair. And I look at it from how we view our region. Was everybody happy that Vice President J.D. Vance essentially went in Germany to support the AfD? They weren't. Was I happy when Olaf Scholz recorded a commercial against the candidate of the other political party in the campaign in my country a year and a half ago? I wasn't. But did I call him out for intervening in domestic political affairs? Or the fundamental question is it okay for Mr. Scholz to intervene in domestic political affairs, but it's not okay for J.D. Vance to intervene in domestic political affairs? And I think sometimes the double standards that are established by some politicians in Europe are causing a gap in that relationship. So we have to understand that if we want to apply principles and we want others to, or to be more precise, if we want others to apply a principle, we have to apply that same principle as well. And I think in modern politics, in the 21st century, we are not in the 90s anymore. We have access to so much more information. Social media is so abundant. There are so many more risks to various types of interventionism and influence coming from third-party actors that we cannot allow these types of issues to draw a hedge in a relationship that is fundamentally important to the future of Western civilization as we know it. Disagreements will be there. It is the role of politicians to solve disagreements. As I myself said, I am not happy with the disagreement with Bulgaria, but I am willing to engage on finding a solution. And I respect that on the other side, as much as I might disagree with the argument of the other government, there is a democratically elected government that I have to work with. Am I sometimes frustrated by their views? More often than not. But I work and I engage, and I will continue to engage until we find a solution. And that needs to happen with the transatlantic relationship as well. It needs to be nurtured. Solutions need to be found. And we cannot go and directly in confrontation with a democratically elected official.
Sure. I mean, that does speak to popular democracy, but there is another component to democracy, which is the liberal component. And there perhaps some view it slightly different. But you are also Minister for Foreign Trade. How do you see Trump's approach to tariffs and world trade? And do you think this could have an impact also on your country?
First of all, directly connected to this, but to touch also on an issue on the transatlantic relationship, and that is the issue of defense spending, where we have to be brutally honest between each other. The United States is absolutely right. We were not doing enough on defense spending, and not just on defense spending, but also on defense manufacturing in Europe. And this is an issue where Europe needed a wake-up call, and it has now received the wake-up call. And because it received the wake-up call, you see a very direct reaction from European leaders, from European institutions, both on the EU level, but also on the domestic level. I think on trade issues, there are various risks that are there. Let there be no doubt, our economy is deeply connected to the European economy. We do not believe that we can replace Europe as our key trading partner with anybody, nor do we wish to do this. So are there various risks that could occur because of not just tariffs, but other mechanisms and decisions being made in Washington? Yes. We have to anticipate, we have to react, and we have to find solutions. It is the role of elected officials to find solutions, not to complain. So in the current context that we have, we will do the best, not just to maintain our economic standard, but make it even better.
And finally, if I remember correctly, earlier last month, there was an agreement for cooperation on defense that was signed between Albania, Kosovo, and Croatia. How do you view that initiative? And of course, I think the agreement was saying that it remains open for other countries to join. Would this be something that North Macedonia consider joining in the future?
Of course. We will always look at these types of initiatives. And as we said, the security architecture of Europe is something that we have a role in nurturing. We are a member state of NATO. We are not a large member state of NATO, and that is why I say we understand our limited capacities, or that we don't have unlimited capacity. So in that sense, we will use all avenues of cooperation, but our primary focus from a security perspective will be to be a very clear provider of stability and security for the Western Balkan region.
I think there are a couple more questions in the public if you still have the time. I'll go first there and then to Berta. Yeah.
Good afternoon. My name is Marina Graza-Lasic, and I'm from European Parliament from Election Observation Unit. I was last year observing elections in North Macedonia, and I hope this year I'll have again opportunity in October. My question is regarding Open Balkans. So since the three countries of the Western Balkans didn't express any interest to participate in that initiative, we can just observe that the participation of North Macedonia are giving a regional dimension to this project. So what is your opinion on Open Balkans? Do you see any future of that, or is North Macedonia staying in the project?
Then we come to Berta. I don't know if it's last call, if there's any final questions or comments.
Thank you again for being here. I'm Berta Lopez. I'm a policy analyst at the European Policy Center for Enlargement in the Western Balkans. My question, like you've mentioned in your different interventions, the importance of regional cooperation and the importance of the EU membership being like a reality for the entire of the Western Balkans, not just for North Macedonia. I wanted to ask you about, of course, like I'm not asking you to comment on other countries' domestic political affairs, but on the situation in Serbia, like the current situation in Serbia. Do you think that it can have an effect for the region's EU perspective bit? How do you see it? And for North Macedonia specifically, I don't know if there have been consequences domestically, or there has been any impact on, like, from what's happening in Serbia.
Finally, there is a final hand.
I'm Elena Grabel, and I'm Senior Advisor in the Regional Cooperation Council Liaison Officer here in Brussels. I'm coming from North Macedonia, from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in my previous life, and I will do my best to not be so biased. And I'm going to be very much focused on the regional cooperation. I just like to point it out that North Macedonia, it's one very good example of regional cooperation. Whenever it's about the common regional market or all the other activities and programs that RCC facilitating with. I would like just to pose two short questions because I know that North Macedonia will be host of two next coming summits. The first one should be of the growth plan in the very near future, and the second one it's a digital summit for the region, which will be somewhere in autumn. Do you have, Mr. Minister, some kind of details about it?
Finally, if I can abuse my position, previously we've heard from your country ideas about a renewed approach to integration, to enlargement, which would emphasize integration before accession. And I'm wondering if this is still the philosophy that you want to advocate for, and if so, how do you think that in this further integration, this deepening of integration can occur concretely before actual membership happens?
So I'll start with your question. We joked previously when we met with your colleague that I truly believe you have an institution somewhere here in Brussels that you're not telling us about that usually thinks of these terms, whether it's gradual integration or phasing in. And so we're waiting for the next one. But the concept is this, and without a doubt, we need to establish a system where the nations feel the momentum, that you're not going through the window, but you can actually start seeing it. And what I mean by that, 100% aligned with the CFSP. Bring the aligner countries on board. And I know Ms. Callas has been talking about this, but let's do it. Give us a seat at the table at the meetings. Don't give us a vote, but have us there when we make the decisions together with you that have very direct implications, not just only on our foreign policies, but in turn, these sanctions have implications on our trade policy, on our domestic economies, and so forth. At least give us the right to say what we think when we are aligner countries. Don't bring everybody on board, but the ones that are there with you, that are making the tough decisions with you, supporting you, have us there. These are the types of mechanisms that could be used so that we are there, and it becomes not only just about integration that is legal, but integration that is factual and a cultural integration of having us there when the decisions are made. And I think these types of tools, irregardless of how we call them, it's essentially the same model. Phases of coming in, being part of the decision-making process, adapting to the single market, and so forth. These are very necessary tools that I think could be useful for the region, so that the process of actual enlargement of becoming a member state is not a systematic shock as it was to some countries when it happened too quickly without adequate planning. As Elena mentioned, we are working on these two big events. Sadly, the big Western Balkans Growth Plan Summit was supposed to happen about 10 days ago, but we postponed it because of the tragic events in Kočani. And right now we are working on coordinating the dates on when we would have that taking place. We still haven't come to a final agreement with the Commission because of conflicting travel schedules of various different leaders. The digital summit is also something that we spoke about when you were there with the Secretary General in Skopje, and I know our Ministry of Digital Transformation is very committed to making it a successful, a big summit. It is one of our government's key priorities, digital transformation, especially when it comes to public services and fighting corruption. One of the things that we did when the government was formed is a restructuring government with the formation of a brand new Ministry of Digital Transformation, which is actually spearheading this event. So we hope that in the autumn it is a successful event. The question on Open Balkan. We support all regional initiatives. We don't think that there's a bad regional initiative. Quite to the contrary, there's such an abundance of regional initiatives. Sometimes there's a mix-up and of intertwining in terms of what everybody's doing. But we will support all of them as long as they give tangible input and as long as they produce deliverables. The key issue that I myself had, although we have not left Open Balkan from a formal aspect, as I said, we support all regional initiatives, is that it wasn't very open and it wasn't very Balkan, and that there weren't enough countries there. And at the end of the day, the key question that we all asked ourselves is, where is the border between Albania and Serbia? I mean, I can't see it. And that is a legal reality that we have. But it has been a regional initiative that has proven itself successful in many areas, including the promotion of wine, including the facilitation of and freedom of movement of labor and so forth. So it has had its ups and downs, I would say. I think the Berlin process after the German presidency last year received additional impetus. And in my view, it is right now probably the leading big regional initiative from a political perspective at the moment. But in that sense, our government will continue to support all of the other regional processes out there. On the situation in Serbia, Serbia is our neighbor. And I would never allow myself to comment anything on internal political dynamic within any of our neighbors. What I hope for is stability in all of our neighboring countries, because the more stability there is in all of our neighboring countries, the more room we have to speak about productive processes moving forward, including economy, trade, and the various different initiatives that are always out there in the many fields in which we communicate. Serbia is a key trading partner for us. It is an important political partner for us. We are very involved, as I said, in various different ways in the Serbia-Kosovo relationship, including being a security provider in Kosovo through KFOR. So this is an issue which I can say that we follow, but I will not allow myself to comment on.
Right on time to close, but I want to thank you very much for this very open and interesting exchange. And I want to ask you to help me thank the minister for his intervention and his time. I hope that you, I hope that the gap between expectations and delivery will be closed, and that your efforts will play a role in that respect. And we look forward to welcoming you next time with even better news, if I can say so.
On my side, a huge thank you for the opportunity. I am here the next 2 days for the NATO Foreign Ministers meeting. But this has been something that together with our ambassador Ismaili, we've been working on for a while. So I've used all of today. This is essentially my third event today. So I'm sorry if I'm a bit tired. And to some of you who were at the last event, sorry for being a bit repetitive on some of the issues. But I think it's very important to engage between each other. And I promise and I commit to using further opportunities here in Brussels to come visit you again. Thank you.
With great pleasure. Thank you.